So what we established so far in the previous two sessions, that God has created man with three components that we call the body, the soul, and the spirit, as this diagram shows. And it's titled The Christian Anthropology. And the word anthropology is, it means the study of man, or the science of man. So what we believe is that God has, with his own hands, he took the dust and he fashioned man, as Saint Basil the Great calls it. And then this body that he created included the brain and many other systems, as you all know, in the body systems. There's the central nervous system that exists as well, which includes the body and the spinal cord. What we have established so far is that when this body is run by blood supply, and this brain and the central nervous system is run by the blood circulation, it produces a function which is not physical function, it's psychological, that is not touchable, is intangible, like what we tend to call the psyche or the soul. Some people call it the mind, but we, for this presentation, we're calling it the psyche or the soul. And then we know that God has breathed into this system a breath of life from him that gave the three components, the body and the soul and the spirit, that are in front of you. We made a distinction between those three, and we mentioned that in the Bible, it was mentioned in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23. It says, "Now may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely, and may your whole spirit, soul, and body be preserved blameless at the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ." We also show this diagram in which it illustrates those three components, and they are interconnected. We spoke about how they are interconnected with each other. So what we have discussed is that the part on the left side of the screen was covered in the second lecture. The second lecture was about the body-soul connection. And what we had used, I'm sorry, the presentation is a little bit not showing. Let me just cancel the PowerPoint mode, because sometimes it causes this disfigurement. So I'm just going to use it that way. Okay, so we started the interrelationship between the three of them. In the second lecture, we focused on this one here, which is the body-soul relationship, which we give an analogy of by the hardware software. Like the computer has a hardware stuff that would be representing the brain, and then the software stuff that is representing soul, that is not physical, like we said. And we particularly talked about the soul being composed of the thinking, the emotions, and the will. But I want to highlight in the Bible, and this slide is new, I added this slide, the couple of verses in the Bible that says that the blood circulation in the body is what gives us the life, or gives us the soul. So in Leviticus 17:11, it says, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood." And in Deuteronomy 12:23, it says, "Only be sure that you do not eat the blood, for the blood is the life." In Arabic, actually, it illustrates, بتقول نفس الجسد هي في الدم ولا تأكل الدم لأن الدم هو النفس. So what my point here is that if we take away the spirit and we think from an atheistic mind, they tend to think that all what the human being is a brain that is run by blood, and that of emotions, feelings, and thoughts, that if the blood supply get cut off, the person dies and becomes no more, does not exist. Obviously, this is not what we believe. What we believe is that God has breathed into this system, which here is the brain. We saw the brain here, and this breath gave that system the extension of being godly, and we would cover that today. But just to finish up, what we did before was the body soul connection, which is based on that blood supply. And what we had said last time is that things could go wrong in that system just because that blood supply or that those chemicals were disturbed. And we have said that this list of disorders, the mood disorders, anxiety disorders, psychotic disorders, eating disorders, personality disorders, substance related disorders, all of these disorders could arise from the disturbance of that blood chemicals in the brain. And that's when we highlighted the importance of seeking help in all these disorders that we discussed here. We discussed the depression, we discussed the bipolar disorder, the premenstrual dysphoric disorder, the anxiety disorders. All of that you will find in the previous presentation. We also concluded by saying that God has indicated in the Bible that to honor the medicine, the medical field, including medication. So that's where we stop. For today, we're going to focus on the other side, which is the spirit-soul connection. So as you can see that God has breathed into Adam, and Adam became a living being. That's what the Genesis tells us. This software now is not only run by that blood supply from the physical body or the physical brain, but it has a godly extension that gave it so many blessings, and we will cover that. So we are going to look on that side now of the formula, which is the spirit-soul connection. Let's talk about what did we gain as humans from that breath of life from God. The first thing we got was that this system, the soul, our being, became immortal, became eternal. In other words, it's not only dust and goes back to dust. If we disregard the spirit, cut it off, then yes, we are dust and going back to dust. But then our souls, because it got that breath from God, it became eternal or immortal. It has the capacity of living forever with God. There is a verse, a beautiful verse in Ecclesiastes 3:11 that says that God has put eternity in their hearts, without which or except that no one except that means without which no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to the end. Without that breath of life, we will be confused. We don't know what our meaning. Look at what we also got here is that we got something called objective moral values, which means that we had a conscience. All human beings know what's right and what's wrong without nobody teaches them. Anyone would know that to rape someone or to murder someone, that's wrong. Where is this coming from? Is from the breath of life that God gave us, that gave our mentality, our conscience, ability objectively to delineate between good or bad. In Romans 2:15, it says the work of the law was written in their hearts, their conscience, bearing witness between themselves, their thoughts accusing or else excusing them. We do have a conscience that we took from God. Also, this breath gave us the significance of life. So there are some questions that everyone will one day will question themselves. We call them the existential questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? Without this breath of life from God that was breathed into our souls, we would be lost and have no clue about the answers of these questions. But now we can boldly say we are children of God. We are created by His breath. We function by Him. Why am I here? Well, I'm here to enjoy His presence, His life inside of me, His breath inside of me. Where am I going? Well, I'm preparing myself for eternal life with Him. Look at some of the atheists. One of the atheists here wrote this, that don't believe that there is an extension with God. He says that man is the product of causes which had no provision of the end they were achieving, that has origin. His growth, his hopes and fears, his loves and his beliefs are but the outcome of accidental collections of atoms, that no fire, no heroism, no intensity of thought and feeling can preserve an individual life beyond the grave. That all the labors of the ages, all the devotion, all the inspirations, all the noonday brightness of human genius are destined to extinction in the vast death of the solar system, and that the whole temple of man's achievement must inevitably be buried beneath the debris of a universe in ruins. What a sad and gloomy view of man without the breath of God. Basically, what he says here, that man has no significance whatsoever. That's what he believes as an atheist, that is also only run by the brain. But what we believe is that God, by breathing into our soul that mind there that is thinking, these emotions in there, and this will now is sanctified. So we do not only have a life, but we have a life that has a godly quality. In other words, without this breath, our thoughts and intellects, our minds, will totally be confined into our own selves, and we will simply develop narcissists or egocentrics. And if we only have emotions without the breath of life sanctifying them, then we will be addicted to all kinds of lusts and materialistic things. If all what our wills are going after uh, uh, has has nothing to do with the breath of God, then we will develop greed and vainglory and looking for only this life and its pleasures. And these are all mental health issues. These are mental health issues that are impairments due to loss of the spiritual. If we take away this spirit from the system and we're only functioning as body, soul, hardware, software with the blood supply, and that's it, then we will live a life that is described here by some of the verses. Take this for example. The Lord in Genesis 6 looked at man and said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh. Yet his days shall be done 120 years." So even the lifespan of man dropped after God has seen that they disconnected themselves, or we disconnected ourselves from Him. The New Testament tells us, do not quench the spirits. It's not a good idea to quench the spirit. We become like animals. We just run by the brain and its blood. And also in Jude 1:19, people like that would be described like these are sensual persons who cause divisions, not having the spirit. It's very, very clear. James also says this wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, and demonic. That's what happens when our brains are not enlightened by the Spirit of God. Uh, Briefly discussing specific mental health disturbances due to the disconnection from God. Well, addictions, all kinds of addictions. Many substance and behavioral addictions in their core arise from losing the spirit effect on satisfying the brain pleasure centers, which turn to other sources. In other words, God has put in that brain, if you recall that brain picture, in the middle there are pleasure centers. God has put in there. Why did He put it in there? Because He breathes in it and attracts it to Him to become addicted to Him, and therefore we spend our lives praising and glorifying His name and living a very godly life. When we disconnect that brain from that source of the breath of life, from God, this brain becomes looking for something to cling and to attach to. And what happens is whenever that happens, that attachment turns to be an addiction, whether it's a substance addiction or a behavioral addiction or a person addiction, but at the core, it is an addiction. So let's not leave our spirits to lose that effect on our brains, otherwise we'll turn to be addicts. Other premorbid and morbid personalities arise from that disconnect. Low self-esteem, paranoia, feeling like you're attacked, eccentricity, like becoming weird, you're afraid. Remember the picture of Cain after he killed his brother Abel, and he was running from who? There was no one in there, right? The desert was empty, all his. But he felt like someone is after him. That's paranoia, that's anxiety. Adam and Eve, after disconnecting from God, they turned to be so shameful, doubtful, anxious, depressed, fearful. They're running away. All these negative mental health disturbances happen just because of distancing from God or cutting off the spirit influence. Also, narcissism, as I mentioned before, egocentrism, psychopathic tendencies, like feeling that you're angry, someone who's angry or disregarding everyone. Identity confusion, feeling lost, dependency on someone, can't get rid of that relationship, fear. All of these are, whether premorbid or morbid personality disorders, arise from the disconnect of the spirit. Also, passions, the soul components that I mentioned before, the will, the thinking, the emotions. If they are not protected by the breath of life, they turn into passions. I wrote some of them here, and there's a famous book called Seven Deadly Passions by the Church Fathers. It's the ego, the lust, the gluttony, the slothfulness, the anger, the greed, the vainglory, and envy. That's why Christ came, my beloved, with this statement, and I love to call it the mission statement of Christ. The first time he spoke in his ministry in Nazareth, in the temple, he took the book of Isaiah and said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to," and he listed disturbed mental disorders, preach the gospel to the poor, has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, proclaim liberty to the captives, recovery to the sight to the blind, to set the people at liberty those who are oppressed. That's why in the book of Proverbs, it says the spirit of a man, this breath of life, will sustain him in sickness. So if that man is sick from any of those ailments that we mentioned,